and
This
Hemisphere.
conference will now be recorded.
He has described more than 20 new species of aquatic insect. He has published 8 books, 130 international and national publications in the various journals, and he has surveyed exclusively on the West Ghat, Andaman Nicobar, Western and Eastern Himalayas. To the best of his credit, I can say he is a member of IUCN Odonata Specialist Group, IUCN Southern Asian Invertebrate Specialist Group, and Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services (IPBS), State Wildlife Boards, National Biodiversity Authority, Chennai Snake Park Trust, and many students have also completed PhD under his guidance. So Dr. Subramaniam needs not much more introduction from my side, and his talk will speak a lot of things on the particularly aquatic insect fauna. So now I'm handing over the forum to Dr. Subramaniam sir. Sir, welcome to the Meet the Expert and let us discuss biodiversity forum. I also invite and welcome all the participants to this forum. Now the forum is of yours, sir. Dr. K. Subramaniam, please.
Thank you, Dr. Anil. It is indeed my pleasure to interact with you all. So, let us. My purpose of my talk is to introduce you to the world of aquatic insects. It's a very vast field. So, in this short duration, I just want to give you the glimpse of aquatic insects that is around us and how they are useful for our human welfare and ecosystem services they do. So this is just an introduction to aquatic insects, and we can specialize in various aspects of aquatic insects. So I hope this will encourage you to take up studies on aquatic insects. So if you think like which are the most deadliest animals on planet Earth, like usually we hear about like elephant attacking human beings or a crocodiles attacking human beings or snake bites, people dying of snake bites. But if you look at the statistics, it is the aquatic insect that is killing large number of people. So this data is slightly old. It is up to 2017, but annually about 7.25 lakh people die of mosquito bites. So this simple one slide will tell you why the study of aquatic insects are very important. And mosquito is just one of the aquatic insects. So there are several aquatic insects. So I'm not going to talk about mosquitoes. So I'm just going to talk about insects, aquatic insects, other than mosquitoes also. So just to give an idea that how important aquatic insects are, put out this slide. So, like if you look at the freshwater biodiversity, so that is the living organisms that is present in freshwater of India. So this is for India. About more than 9,000 species of animals are recorded from Indian freshwaters, that is lakes, rivers, ponds, and streams like that. Of these, insect forms bulk of the aquatic bulk of the biodiversity. That is about 4,842, but still people are discovering. So we can roughly say about 50% of aquatic fauna are insects. So the birds are very few. Like you can compare with birds, there's only 243. Or we have very few mammals, aquatic mammals, freshwater I'm talking about. So of course, fishes are very important economically, but aquatic insects are very small in, like very large in number in freshwater. So what are these aquatic insects? So these aquatic insects come in about 13 insect orders. So like some of them, like for example, there are Columbola, there's a springtails, mayflies, Ephemeroptera, Coordinator, dragonflies and damselflies, Plectroptera, stoneflies, Neuroptera, are these lacewings, Megaloptera. Like that, there are about 13 insect orders that is mostly aquatic. But we have some number available, like for example, how many species are there? Like for example, Ephemeroptera, we have 146. And some groups are very large in numbers, like for example, Trichoptera, that's caddisflies, are very large number of species are there. Or Diptera, that is flies. The most forms in this group that are about 1,500. So high diversity is there in aquatic Diptera, that is flies. But altogether, above 5,000 species are there, but still we don't have much knowledge about, like for example, aquatic Orthoptera or aquatic Placodia, which are aquatic cockroaches and crickets and grasshoppers. We don't have much information, but still there are species which is found in Indian waters. But if you look at the evolution of aquatic, they are all they are all ancient insect orders. So like Ephemeroptera are Carboniferous, Odonata, Plecoptera are Carboniferous. So like Orthoptera, many of them are Carboniferous, that is before the dinosaurs, very much about 250 million years old evolutionarily, and some of them are recent. And orders which are highlighted in gray are completely aquatic. So you don't see them in terrestrial ecosystem. So the larvae, they're primarily aquatic insects, like for example, mayflies, dragonflies, Plecoptera. They have adult stage in terrestrial, but larva is aquatic. But other groups, you have both terrestrial and aquatic forms are in other groups. So why we study aquatic insects? So like first is that they are key components of food web in the ecosystem. So several of them are prey to fishes and other vertebrates. They are also predators of several invertebrates, aquatic invertebrates, and it is very easy to study them. It is not very difficult. You can easily study them, and as already told you, they are food of several vertebrates and vertebrates. They are very good indicators of ecosystems and biogeographical studies. You can use them for as very good indicators because of their different dispersal abilities, and they have distinct habitat preference. So each aquatic insect is associated with a particular habitat, especially in larval stage. So you can associate with some particular habitat, and they are very sensitive indicators of environmental pollution. So they can indicate what are the kind of pollutions are having and how we can study them. And already told you they are predators of aquatic animals. Even fish, some large aquatic insects can feed on fishes also. So they are because of all these things, aquatic insects are very useful. And where they are found, where aquatic insects are. So they are found in small habitats like tree holes. They are found in tree holes like several species of mosquitoes and flies breed in tree holes. These are called phytotelmata. And most of these they during rainy season they get water, and in that short duration for few weeks or even few months, the several insects breed in this. So one of the simplest habitats. Then you can see them in hill streams and rivers, waterfalls, ponds and lakes, inland ponds and lakes. You can see them, or even man-made aquatic habitats like paddy fields. You can see aquatic insects. And there are some specialist groups like specialized aquatic insects which require like high altitude streams and peat bogs. They are found there, or like even some habitat specialists like Myristica swamps, which is found in southern eastern Ghats forest. So there are aquatic insects specialized in such habitats. Or some of them are like tree canopy. I already told you, like tree holes breeding. So there are species which breed in tree holes, and even some of them are even highly specialized because they live in other organisms. So this is a specialized what do you call, not a parasite, but they live inside molluscan shells in a freshwater ecosystem. So this is one symbiogoy and one mayfly larva living in a highly endangered freshwater mollusca Pseudomulleria dialy. So which is found in like Krishna River system, only found in Krishna River system. So this mayfly specializes in living in the molluscan shells. These are Pseudomulleria dialy. So how to collect aquatic insects? So there are several methods to collect aquatic insects. One simplest method to collect adults are light traps. So what you do is that you keep a very bright mercury vapor lamp in front of a white sheet during near a water body like a stream or a pond. So you can collect aquatic insects, the adults aquatic insects which is emerging. So like can see several moths in the picture, and also you can see some small trichoptera and other things. So the these moths are not aquatic, but there are aquatic moths. I'll come to it later. So they will get attracted to it and get you can. So this is a Caddi's flies. So this These are all caddis flies. So you can collect aquatic insects from adult aquatic insects with this kind of light traps. So this is a light trap collection. Mayfly attracted to light trap. So same light trap. So closer view. So you can take from there. Or you can collect aquatic insects using simple hand nets in shallow streams and rivers. So these are kick nets where you can use a screen net kind of thing in a flowing water. So where the insects get collected. So this is how you deploy a kick net. So one person is holding a kick net against the water current and another person disturbs a 1 square meter area in front of the net. So all the insects that get collected are trapped in the net. And like this is also another view of the kick net sampling, where the substrate is disturbed and the insects get trapped in this screen. So these screens have a standard size. So this is about a 150 micron size. Of these nets are available in, especially where there is a lot of prawn culture and other places, especially coastal areas. So these are also used for collecting prawn larvae. So similar net you can use. And this is how all these are mayfly nymphs. So this is how they get collected in this one, the net. So you can see the closer view, like you can see all these are mayfly nymphs. So these ones you have to pick it up with the fine pressure and forceps so that you don't damage the larva. So that if you damage, then all the characters, identification characters will be lost. So you carefully collect all the larvae, and you can store them in 70% alcohol in the field, and after coming back to laboratory, you can transfer them to absolute alcohol after proper labeling. So you can transfer them to a tray for sorting. So you'll also get some small fishes, crabs, and other aquatic invertebrates. So you can select whichever one you want for further studies. You can see here a lot of beetles, aquatic beetles are there, and also you have mayfly nymphs. So all these things are there. So let us see what are the different kind of aquatic insects you get. So these are mayflies. These are mayflies are the most primitive of all insects that is flying, and they are called Ephemeroptera because their lifespan is very short. So adults live only for 1 day. So basically they come out for breeding, and after that they die. So and species diversity is also very less, about 160 now. It is about 160 species are there in India. Of the, globally about 2,500 species are this. And the life cycle of mayflies, if you look at the very simple life cycle. So adult female lays eggs in water body. So after that it dies. So eggs hatch in 2 weeks. Then you have the nymph. I'll show you the pictures of nymph. They complete. They are cold and they as a nymph stages in water and subimago emerges from it. Like unlike other insects, so from the nymphs there is a stage called subimago. Subimago looks exactly like the adult, but only the reproductive parts are not well developed and things are not well, like things are not clear. So it goes one more mode to become adult. So this is a mayfly. So most of our mayflies complete life cycle in 1 year, but some species complete more than one life cycle in a year. So in cold altitudes, higher altitudes, there are species which complete life cycle in more than 1 year. So this is the diversity of mayfly nymphs. So each and every family of mayfly have different morphology. So just by looking at the morphology, especially the gill structure and the head shape and other characters, you can identify the families very easily. So, and mayflies are very sensitive to water quality. So they are mostly found in very highly oxygenated water with very high oxygenation. So they are found in very clear pristine streams, most of the species. But there are some species that is also found in paddy fields and ponds. But again, they are found where there is no water pollution or aquatic pollution. So this is how mayfly nymphs look. So this is Ephemeridae mayfly, found in very high fast flowing streams without pollution. This is another Leptophilidae, very common family in fast-flowing streams. Leptophilidae. Then there are some other common families, that is Cnidae, Beachidae, Isonychidae, and Heptaginidae. So these are the different kind of Ephemeroptera families that is commonly found in our streams. The next comes to a group of aquatic insects. These are the stoneflies or the Placoptera. Placo means stoneflies. So India about we have 113 species of Placoptera. Again, a low diversity, and most of the species are found in Himalaya. So in the peninsular in India, we have about 20 species, 22 species are there. So they are found in hill streams and fast-flowing, unpolluted, well-oxygenated hill stream, mostly cold hill streams. So again, the life cycle of Placoptera is also similar to that of mayfly. So you might have noticed something significant here, or I'll just point to you that the mayflies keep their wings over their thorax, like folded over their thorax, like vertically folded over their thorax. And it is not like here, the Placoptera, it is transversely folded, not vertically folded. It is transversely folded over the thorax. So this is these two groups of insects, like insects which keep the wings folded over their thorax and in the vertically, and those who keep the wings folded over their thorax transversely are two major group of insects. These are called Paleoptera. The former is called Paleoptera, and this is called Neoptera. So here was a major evolutionary change in the insect evolution from the Paleoptera to Neoptera. So almost all insects are now we are having our Neopteran insects. All the Odonata and the Ephemeroptera are Paleoptera insects. So the life cycle of Placoptera also is similar to that of mayflies, but only there is no subimago state. So a female lays eggs in water, then the nymphs develop. Nymphs take more than 1 year to develop, stonefly nymphs, and the nymphs emerge into adults. So the most adults mostly stay in the vegetation near the water body. That is riparian vegetation. So this is the photograph of larva of common Placoptera found in our stream, Neoperla, genus Perlidae. And there are several like mayflies also. They have the larvae are very different for different families. So just by looking at the larva and larval characters, you can identify the at least up to family level. You can easily identify. So next comes the Odonata. So these are the dragonflies and damselflies. India we have 496 species now. The figure is not correct, and more than 6,000 species are there world over. So like they are very charismatic and very colorful. So they attract a lot of people's attentions. But remember that dragonflies and damselflies are aquatic insects. They are primarily aquatic insects. So the larva completes life cycle in the water aquatic habitat, and adults are terrestrial. So they mostly occupy ecosystems near to wetlands. And the dragonfly larva and damselfly larva can quickly be distinguished easily, because damselfly larvae have a structure called the caudal lamella. So they are leaf-like structures at the end of the abdomen. These are called caudal filaments. And Anisophora, that is dragonfly larvae, have caudal gills, and they have a rectal. So they move by jet propulsion. So they take up water and force that backwards forcefully, and they move forward. And another characteristic feature of this dragonfly larva is their mouth part. So their mouth part is like a mask, the labium. That's called labium is a mask kind of structure, and that is very specialized for capturing the prey. So this is so when it is not in use, it is kept closed over their mouth part. So it is something like a JCB. You might have seen JCB. So it is very similar to that, and suddenly it can extend it, and they have very sharp spines and spines, and which is used to kill the prey, feed on. So they are very voracious feeders, and even the larva can feed even on other larvae, and they are even on other larvae of their own species, and they also can feed on emerging adults of their own species. So they are very voracious feeders. So this is the mouth part, microscopic view of mouth part of dragonfly larva. This is the dragonfly larva. So this is how it looks, very close up, and very brown and blue. And this is the mouth part of dragonfly larva. Another interesting aspect of dragonfly larva is their migration. So during monsoon or just after monsoon, you might have seen that large swarms of these dragonflies emerging suddenly from nowhere. So these are all the dragonflies of one species called the Candala praerescens. So these are globally distributed dragonflies which is found throughout the tropics in the world. So even in remote islands, you can see these dragonflies because they can move in large distances. So what they do, they use this winds, monsoon winds. They move monsoon use monsoon winds to move across Indian subcontinent. So, like during start of the monsoon, they move from south to north, and during retreating monsoon, they go from north to south. But it is not the same population that is migrating. So during this movement, they also breed. So their life cycle is also very short. They can complete their life cycle in 50 days, and they move from one place to another. So that is why before rain starts or before arrival of rain, you can see large number of dragonflies. And Indian farmers have also observed this, and they believe that if you can see large swarms of dragonflies in 1 or 2 days, you are very likely to get rains. So this is because they track the monsoon winds, and that is how these dragonflies move. And it is it is reported that these populations of dragonflies from Indian subcontinent, they cross the Arabian Sea, they reach Africa. So when the monsoon retreats, that is October, November monsoon, the northeast monsoon retreats, the large populations of dragonflies also move with the monsoon winds, and they cross the uh, Arabian Sea to reach Africa to breed there. So that is how these dragonflies migrate across Indian subcontinent. The next major groups are aquatic bugs. So these are generally we see a lot of aquatic bugs. You can see them in wetlands. So uh, some of them are like diving. They live underwater, and some of them are live on the water surface. They're all aquatic, like uh, like all these aquatic insects. They can't take oxygen from the dissolved oxygen from the water, but they require atmospheric oxygen. So they have mechanisms to collect atmospheric oxygen. So they have siphons, they hold the water. So or they live in the water surface, like several aquatic gerids, they live in water surface to take atmospheric oxygen. So these are some of the common aquatic insect families that is found in India. Very common in all our water. What is this? Geridae or water striders, you can see them on the water surface. You have Velidae, Hydrometridae or water mushrooms, Epridae, then Mesovelidae. So these are the different, there are several aquatic insects. Then you have this Belostomatidae. These are giant water bugs, huge ones. You can see them in ponds, lakes, reservoirs. Then you have Notonechidae. These are small aquatic insects. Then you have Nepidae, water scorpions, Coryxidae, then Theidae, Naucoridae, Octoridae, Heliotryphidae, Clastostrictae. So these are all the aquatic insect families. So you notice that all of them have different morphologies, and most of them are predators. So unlike other bugs, they all feed on other animals, other small insects, and other crustaceans. Also, the large ones like the Belostomid today can easily feed on small fishes. So these are some of the common species of aquatic bugs that is found throughout India. This is Dendrostetus productus, Aquarius adelaide, Limnogonus nitidus, or Philomera. Sometimes it's Apotrophis or Aranatra filiformis. So these are the common species you might have seen in your even during when you go to any water body, you can easily see this common aquatic insects. Again, some more photos of this common aquatic insect, Diplonicus annulatus, or Ventidus, so some name. So these are the common aquatic insects found in our aquariums. So these are all microscopic photos. In field, this is how you see the different aquatic insects. Next groups are aquatic beetles. So these are also large number of beetles are there. More than 800 species are there in India in several families. So most of them are either predators or saprophytes, and the common ones are like this Gyarinidae. Gyarinidae or Viticidae are very common, and these are the larvae of the aquatic beetles. And this is one type of larva. This is also larva of aquatic beetles. This is called Finidae, water penis, water penny, and this is Gyarinidae. So the interesting aspect of Gyarinidae is that unlike other insects or even other animals, they have four pairs of legs. Like one pair is on the top and another pair is on the bottom. The bottom pair is used to see what is under the water because they live on water surface. You might have seen this Gyarinidae very common in all water bodies, including our wells, ponds, lakes, reservoirs, streams, and another pair is on the top of the body so that they can on the water surface. So simultaneously they can see above the water and under the water. These are DT6. Most of them are predators. So they are very good predators. So they are very powerful predators, and even you can see them here feeding on a skitter frog. So like they are like even if you try to handle them, they can give a very painful bite. It's not bite actually. They have spine, and with that spine they just jab you. So this is a skitter frog being fed by this DT6 beetle. So these are also very powerful predators in aquatic ecosystems. So as I already told you, the whirligig beetle, the Gyarinidae, have two pairs of eyes. So this is just a picture depicting the two pair of eyes of Gyarinidae. You can see there is one pair above the on the dorsal side and one pair below that is on the ventral side. This is a Cephinidae water fin. You can see the body is very smooth, streamlined, and it is round and very flat. So this they because of their habitat. So they live on the in fast flowing streams. They live on the rock surface. This is to resist the water current and to have a minimum water current resistance, and they get stuck to the rocks and small pebbles in aquatic ecosystems. These are some of the common diseases. So, like some of the species have sucking pads, like vacuum sucking pads on their legs to get attached to the uh, substrate, like rocks and other places. Next comes the Diptera. So, Dipteras are one of the major aquatic insect groups. Like terrestrial ecosystems are mostly dominated by beetles, but in aquatic ecosystems are so these aquatic ecosystems are largely dominated by flies, so Diptera, and there are several species and very important medically, veterinarily, because several of them are vectors like mosquitoes and uh, tsetse flies, black flies. Several of them are like cabanids. They are all vectors of several diseases. So some of them are very interesting, like for example, Phylloras. So like they also have sucking pads on the ventral side to get so that they get attached to the rock surfaces. Then Simulium is the black fly. So they transmit the river blindness disease like onchocerciasis, but fortunately it is not there in India. This disease is not there. It is confined to Africa. But the Simulium, there are several species of Simulium are present in Indian subcontinent. Then you have this Chironomus, that is bloodworms. So these Chironomus are also very good indicators of water quality. You might have seen in aquarium, the live worms, they sleep It is a bloodworm they call. These are all chironomid larvae. Mostly they are found in very polluted waters, high organic pollution. But some species are there that is also found in pure unpolluted waters are also. Then next comes the Tipulidae. So these are the large mosquito-like flies. These are called crane flies or daddy longlegs. So here also we have several species in India. At least more than 1,000 species are there in India. And this is how the larva looks. They mostly found in a decaying organic matter within a stream. Then next comes the, like after Diptera, this is the most species diverse group. This is called caddis flies or Trichoptera. The adults looks like this. So this is a light trap photograph. You can see the background of a screen of light trap. So they are very much attracted to light. So this is one of the easiest way to catch them at night. Daytime you hardly see adults. So caddis fly are very close to phylogenetically very close to moths and butterflies, that is Lepidoptera. So like Lepidoptera, they also have fine, instead of scales, they have very fine hairs kind of. And like Lepidoptera, they can also make silk. And with the silk, they make case. Like this is called a caddisfly case. So this is, they use small pebbles or woody debris to make a protective cover around it. And when they live in the water, so they're mostly aquatic, so they live in the water. So they make a case. These are called caddis-like cases, and they pupate inside that case only. So and the adults emerge. So this is a complete metamorphosis, and like butterflies, and they also have silk-producing structures. Like butterflies, they produce silk. So this is how a caddisfly case looks, and each of this family have a different structure of the case, and you can easily identify the family by looking at the case morphology. So this is a case of a Stenocychidae larva. So the larva, it is like a basket or a net. This net is made of silk, and it is held against the current. It is like a net, fish net, and whatever the small organism they get entrapped in that one, they feed on. So this is a larval case of hydrocyte. You can see they have used pebbles and silk to make this nest. This is hydrocyte larval case. So this is Lepidostomata larva. So this has used woody debris, bark of some riparian plant to make a box-like case to live inside. So this is how Liminiferida larval cases. This is how the larval cases look in the hand. Like when you take out the water. So these are all small sand particles which are held together by silk. So there are interesting larvae which makes cases even with leaves. So this is Anisocentropus, Calamus rapidae family, which uses two leaves to make a case and live inside them. You can see the larva; it has two leaves it has used. So you have Macronema. So there are some free-living caddisfly also, but they live freely without any cases. These are Macronema or Glossosoma. The Glossosoma also have a case. And you have other interesting cases like Helicocychidae. So the case is like a molluscan shell made out of sand particles of Goyera species of Goyrodus. The Goyrodus is also made out of small leaf pits, dried leaf pits. The other very minor groups of aquatic insects are aquatic moths like Lepidoptera. There are aquatic Lepidoptera, there mostly Pagalidae. Then you have this Megalopteran. So only about 24 species are there in India. Megaloptera, dobson flies, and albatross, Nemobines, so and pygmy grasshoppers. So there are several Orthoptera, that is Nemobines and pygmy grasshoppers, that is living not completely aquatic or not completely terrestrial. They live in interface between aquatic and terrestrial ecosystem. So they you can say that they live in the intermediate zone. So they can even escape to water with the need persist, and they are also semi-aquatic. So this is a picture of Megaloptera, this is Neuromus astroindicus, which is the only species of Megaloptera found in the Western Ghats. Neuromus astroindicus. So India already told about 26 species are there. Most of the species are found in Himalaya, high altitude Himalaya, with very fast flowing streams and rivers. This is how the Megaloptera larva looks. You can see like they have spines all over their abdomen, and they are also predators. They predate on other aquatic organisms. Next is Neuroptera, that is lacewings. There are about 335 lacewings in India, but that includes terrestrial forms also. The aquatic form include only one family, that is Sisiridae, and that family is associated with freshwater sponges. So they have freshwater sponge by their larvae living the freshwater sponge. Then you have these Blaberidae. These are called aquatic cockroaches. So these aquatic cockroaches are very specialized kind of group of organisms, and we know very little about them. And they are found in decaying organic matter in wetlands. So they are not fully aquatic, so they don't have structures to swim in water or respiratory mechanisms to survive underwater. But they live in a very highly specialized and highly but becomes highly moist environment next to aquatic habitat, like where there is a lot of vegetation decay and everything. Especially, you can see them in waters where there is a lot of accumulation of leaf litter and other or vegetable. So the major problem with aquatic insects is that to identification of larval stages. So most of the aquatic insects, when you do sampling, you get larvae. So the rarely you get, because most of the species are live in water, so you do aquatic sampling, so you get larvae, and we don't have enough material, literature material to identify the larva accurately. And if you want to identify larva accurately, well, you have to rear them and to grow them as adult, and then you do the identification. But generic level identification is possible, and that is enough for most of the basic ecological work or biomonitoring work. But identification of all larvae is very difficult, because we are still learning a lot about aquatic insects, and for most of the aquatic insects, the stages are not described completely. And how we can use aquatic insects in biomonitoring? It's already talked at the beginning of our talk, how aquatic insects are used in biomonitoring. So, what are these indicators? Like indicators are like you can measure something, what is happening in the ecosystem process. So, you are actually measuring some ecosystem processes in the indicator. And what are the characters of an indicator? So, it should be sensitive to early warning. So, the indicator should tell you that something is happening, something is going to happen. Like that, it should be sensitive, and it should be distributed over widely geographic area. So an indicator should be widely spread. It is not that you take a very narrow endemic and you say it's an indicator species. It is not good, because it cannot tell beyond its geographic. So an ideal indicator should be at a very good distributed over a very wide geographic area. Then it should be able to provide continuous assessment over a wide range. It should be you can assess every month or every 15 days. So you should be regularly assessed. So you should be able to do that, and it should be relatively independent of sample size. It is not that when you increase the sample size, you are getting a result, and if you decrease the sample size, you are getting another result. It should not be like that. It should be independent of sample size, and it should be easy and cost effective. Collect and assess. You should not use a lot of gadgets, or you need a laboratory. No, it doesn't require that. And it should also be able to differentiate between natural cycles and anthropogenic stress. So it should tell whether it is due to natural cycles of the ecosystem or the anthropogenic effect. And it should be relevant to significant phenomena. So it should be indicating water quality or a riparian health or some ecosystem processes. So because of all these things, the aquatic insects are selected as a very good indicators. So what you actually look at when you do an assessment, you look at species presence. So what are the kind of species you can see, that is presence or absence, that is appearance of tolerant species or intolerant species, or number of species, that is species diversity aspects, like number of species richness we can say, and change in abundance, whether some species are increasing or some species are decreasing in this one. Say for example, we are looking at whether mosquito populations are increasing, or we are looking at some disease vector populations are increasing. So these are also biomonitoring, because you are monitoring the characteristics of the bioecosystem. So this is how a very generalized uh, generalized schema, where what actually happens is that in a natural, unpolluted, unperturbed ecosystems, you have a set of species. So, and due to disturbance or due to some kind of disturbance, or deforestation, that ecosystem is changed and a newer set of species are colonized. So, which are sensitive to, which are tolerant to all these disturbances. So, entire community structure is changed. So, the species number may remain same. Like before disturbance, also you may get X number of species, and after disturbance, also X number of species. If you look at just the species number may be same, but the composition of the species would have entirely changed. So, you are changing the pollution sensitive taxa to pollution tolerant taxa. So why we wanted to study all these aquatic insects in context? What is a larger context is that nowadays we are facing a lot of water crisis, especially like India. So you know that how much water crisis is there, especially during summer season. And all the red area indicate the physical availability of physical scarcity of water. Okay, so India is one of the highly stressed, water stressed areas, especially peninsular India. So there is an enormous pressure on water and water resources. And if you look at the global biodiversity crisis, and there are multiple environmental stresses that are acting on our aquatic ecosystem, especially rivers. So agriculture runoff, pollution, invasive species, all these things threaten the systems. And biodiversity endangerment of ecosystems are about 65% of the world's river habitats are threatened. And these are all studied aspects. These are all people have studied these aspects. And if you look at the whole world, Indian subcontinent, the streams and rivers are most threatened. So the reasons for this are many. So there are several reasons. One is this large hydroelectric projects. You can see that entire downstream is dried up because a lot of water is impounded on the upstream, and entire downstream is dried up. So only during monsoon it opens, and the entire river is damaged because of this changing habitat. And next one is mining. So there are several mines that water catchment. So what happens is that during monsoon, all the mine dumps or all the mine waste ends up in wetlands. The next one is riparian deforestation. So large part of uh, the riparian is the habitat that is close to the stream on either banks of the stream. So the riparian areas are deforested for various purposes, especially for agriculture or fodder or other things. So there is a destruction of riparian habitat, so that lead to increased siltation and the change in florage in streams and rivers. So this is another part. This is infrastructure projects along the river courses. So what happens is that during a monsoon or a heavy rain, all the dumps of this river construction is entering into stream, changing the entire habitat of the ecosystem. Again, is the our usage, how we use our ecosystems, rivers and streams, is by like irresponsible use disposal of garbage. So several places, especially hill streams, it is very common because they don't have proper treatment plants or something. So most of the garbage when we go as tourists ends up in some rivers and streams, killing the entire ecosystem. So this is all picture of the Muta River, Pune. So our entire river is now converted into carrying for urban industrial pollution. I don't need to say this. But we have a lot of laws, government initiatives from 1857 itself to protect our wetlands. So like you have this Indian Fisheries Act, like other major ones are like Forest Act or Wildlife Protection Act. There are several environmental act is there. And the recent one, the most recent one, the wetland conservation and management rules. So all these things are there to protect our wetlands, but still we are lacking in implementation. So at the ground level in reality, implementation of these things, a lot of gaps are there, and for that we need a lot of awareness. Then only the students and citizens become very much aware about the importance of wetlands and why we need to conserve them. Then only we can implement all these acts and rules in its proper the way it is envisaged and enacted for the better conservation of land. So I think maybe my last slide. With this I stop, and now this is we can discuss.
Thank you very much, sir. It's indeed a great pleasure to have such wonderful slides and wonderful talk. Really, we are blessed to have you in as today's expert. So now I am requesting the forum. If anybody is having some questions, please come forward and you can ask. And some questions we will take from the chat box also. Please, if anybody is having some questions, please go ahead. Sir, I will request you to be on camera, on your camera, and remove these slides.
Anil, I can stop sharing or I can keep watching?
No, sir, slide you can remove so that your face will be visible in a bigger screen. Please, if anybody is having questions, please go ahead.
There is one question from Barampur University. I will take that first. So,
அப்படியா? ஓ, நான் தீர்ந்துட்டேன்னு நினைச்சிருக்கேன். அது சாப்பிடுவான்.
Asking first, then go for the questions in the chat box. If some senior person is asking some questions, please go ahead by yourself. Then we'll go to chat box, sir.
Yes. Okay.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah, please go ahead, Dr. Hamid. Please go ahead.
Okay, so which groups of aquatic insects can be considered as the pollution indicators or the biological indicators, sir?
Okay. There are several groups are there, but like for general, there is a protocol itself called BMW, that is Biomonitoring Working Party Score System, W4 it is called. So they have come up with a set of families actually from different orders of aquatic. So instead of what the idea is that instead of looking at one species or one group of aquatic insects, what you do is at community level. So and families, they have derived aquatic insects scoring what is the biomonitoring score for each of these. So from 0 to 10. Okay, so the 10 means highly sensitive. 0 means least most tolerant groups are there. So what are so like when you have this high score value communities, that means the water is very clear and very pristine. So you have a very good scoring system, and that standard tables are present. You can just look at it, and you can but generally speaking, mayflies, stoneflies, and trichoptera, it's called EPT complex. That is very widely used for monitoring, biomonitoring. Three insect groups, that is Ephemeroptera, Plecoptera, and Trichoptera. If these groups are present in your water body, that means water is very pristine. But presence of, like for example, mosquito larva or chironomid larva, or even the oligochaetes, that is annelida, not insect actually, indicate a pollution level.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hamid. If anyone is having some questions, please go ahead, or else we'll go to the chat box. Sir, Subhasri Sahu from Brahmpur University, she is asking, what about the marine insects? What are the peculiarities of freshwater and marine insects? Do insects found in hot springs?
Okay. So actually, as you may be aware also, the marine insect diversity is very poor. So you cannot say there is only one marine insect, that is halobates, purely marine. You may see insects on the shore, on the beach you may see, but they are not aquatic marine insects. But there are purely marine means there is only one marine insect, that is halobates. It's a water strider which can live in pelagic environment. But other than that, there are no other marine insects. All other insects are aquatic freshwater insects. And the second question, the characteristics of freshwater and marine insects. The basic characteristics of freshwater insect is that there are two types of, basically you can divide freshwater insects into two groups. One is that evolutionarily aquatic, evolutionarily freshwater insects like mayflies, dragonflies, stoneflies, or these are all evolved in freshwater ecosystem. So they can breathe dissolved oxygen. So they can use the dissolved oxygen, and they have mechanisms to absorb dissolved oxygen directly from the water, and they live in water. The larval stages live in water. And the second group of insects are secondarily aquatic, like aquatic bugs, aquatic beetles. They live, though they live in water, they cannot take dissolved oxygen. So they have morphological adaptations to take atmospheric oxygen. So they have, like for example, aquatic bugs have a siphon on the tip of their abdomen to take it is something like snorkeling. So they take atmospheric oxygen, or they have very fine hairs which are water resistant. So they, every few minutes they come out to the water surface, take an air bubble, and go underwater. So these are the two mechanisms they have. So other characteristic mechanisms these aquatic insects have is their body shape. So most of the aquatic insects have a very streamlined body, so that the water resistance is very minimum when they move or something. So, or they have can attach if they are living in very fast growing water bodies. So they can attach to the substrate. So they have pads. So several beetles and several Trichoptera have suction pads in their body parts, or they can produce silk like the Trichoptera larva. So they attach the silk to some substrate and they roam around. Or some of them use ballast, like for example, this Trichoptera, they add stone to their body, so that they don't get carried away by water current. And aquatic beetles and aquatic bugs, they have their legs modified into swimming paddles, so they can easily swim underwater and everything. And some of the beetles which are predatory, they have vision, which is used for with which they can use it for underwater.
One more question from Priyadarshini Raut. What about the availability of aquatic insect during sunrise and sunset? Are the sunrise and sunset are set a factor for sample collection?
Yes, especially when you are collecting adults using light trap. So sunset is the best time to collect. Sunset means not exactly sunset. Immediately after sunset, when it becomes dark, so that is the time you set your light trap. So that is the time because several species adults emerge during sunset, so they get directly attracted to light. And also some species swarm. Swarming is a behavior where large number congregate and they mate. So several species also swarm during sunset or sunrise, so that is a good time to sample adults.
SK Imran asks, which protocol are used to identify the aquatic insects?
Okay, so like if you want to identify like if you want to identify at a family level, there are several keys are available to identify at family level. And for genus and species level identification, you have to go to specific monographs for each of the groups. So like there are things for beetles, like for example, if you want to identify aquatic beetles of family Gyarenidae, there is a fauna volume. Fauna of India volumes is there by Vazirani. You can identify using that one. Or if you want to identify aquatic bugs, there are literature published by Dr. Tirumalai on identification of aquatic bugs. So then there are several monographs which is continuously revised and updated. So you can refer to them, or even Trichoptera or any group. But still, there are like gaps are there. For example, larva identification is very difficult because you don't have keys. So all the larvae is not yet described because adults are described, so larva is unknown. So you have to use the technologies like DNA barcoding to identify the larval status.
Shailaja Negi asked one question. She is working on water mites. Can you please give some information about it? How they are bioindicators? Are they tolerant to polluted water or sensitive towards water pollution?
Okay, so the water mites are Hydrochloridae. So most of the Hydrochloridae are what you call are parasites or semi-parasites of other aquatic insects. So they you can see them attached to the body parts of other aquatic insects. So they are very brightly colored and everything. But their pollution sensitivity or pollution tolerance, I think not much is known. Because not much is known, generally speaking. So I think we have to do a lot of studies on that, their pollution sensitivity aspect. But also even taxonomically, they are not very well characterized in India. Hydrochloridae.
Ankita Mishra is asking, are there any means to control invasive species?
Of invasive species. So, like the aquatic insect invasive species, you can say is that mostly it is mosquitoes. So one is the, you may be aware of this Aedes aegypti is a very well-known invasive species. So though it is a native to India, it is invasive to other parts of India. But now the urban areas it is very widely. Another group is that the our Culex species. Culex, they are vectors of several diseases. That is, Culex quinquefasciatus is also an invasive species. Not though in India, but other parts. But mostly they are not habitat specific. I told you, like they are all habitat specific. So if you want to control invasive species, you need to know what is their habitat, and you need to modify the habitat in such a way that they are made unsuitable for this invasive species.
Krishnakant Bakshi asked a very good question. How to track the migration route of insect? Which method?
Okay. See, the most definitive method, like what people have done for butterflies is that by putting very fine small tags in butterflies, and you can track this, you can collect these tagged butterflies from some other location, and you know from how they are migrating. But but you don't know how they are traveling from one place to another. Like you may know from where they have reached. So to know from where they are traveling, the best way is to have a network of citizen scientists. So people are reporting, like large number of people are reporting the same phenomena across the large geographic area. So then you know how the things are moving, and this requires a lot of data, not just like 1 year, 2 year data will not do. So you need to collect a lot of data over the years to know how these things are moving. But there are modern methods, like for example, you can look at stable isotopes. You might have heard about stable isotopes. So you feed the adult or larva with the stable isotope. There are ways of doing that. So then you have the stable isotopes ingested, and this when they grow as adult, so that stable isotope is also there. And that's the beauty of stable isotope, is that even in the next generation, that stable isotope is transmitted. So what happens is that in the egg stage or a larval stage also the same stable isotope is there. Say for example, if you're feeding an adult, the stable isotope will be there in the larva or the egg. Or if you're feeding a larva, it will be there in the adult. So you feed stable isotope and you collect it from different places to trace the migratory path. So that is how people are trying to look at how insects migrate.
Manas asked, it was very informative session on aquatic insect diversity. Sir, my question is, do you have any field guide for aquatic insects?
Like you have online resources are there, but that will give you only an idea about up to family level. Okay, so what is the family is present and how to identify them, and definitely you cannot identify them, because the field guide means you should be able to identify without like just by looking at like a butterfly or a or a what you call, or a bird. Some you can identify up to family level, but if you want to do a detailed identification, you need a microscope, because some characters are not visible with naked eye. So you need an aid of microscope, at least a field microscope, to identify up to a genus or a species level. So you to some species can be some groups can be identified up to this one in the field using field guide. So, but all that only up to a family level.
One Mahadev Atole asked how to calculate number of insects in single station or spot of water bodies.
What how to calculate?
Insects in single station or any spot of water bodies. He is asking probably about the number, counting number.
See, these are all like all these are no, like there is no way to collect to absolute number. Okay, so whatever we are doing, these are all estimates. So you might be aware of the different methods of estimating biodiversity. So one sample you will not get anything. So you need to do repeated sampling. And the one way of doing is that if you're doing a water, let us say if you're doing a pond or a lake, what ideally you do is that you do repeated sampling over 1 or 2 seasons, and you plot it on a species accumulation curve. So that then you know that after so many samples, I am not getting any more new species. That is how you know that, okay, I have 56 species. So even after repeated sampling, I am only getting 56 species in this. So even after this you have to do some statistical analysis, where there are several species diversity estimates. You can look at on the web to look at those estimators, and you can say that, okay, this is my estimate, and with this statistical confidence, I can say that I may have plus 2, 10, 10 species, or a plus minus 10 species. because your sampling method will not give you all the species, because there are several reasons for that, not just one reason, but there are several reasons. The one basic reason is that the life cycle of insects or any organism for that matter varies. So in one sampling or two sampling sessions, or even 2 years of sampling, you will not capture all the species that is potentially present in that ecosystem.
And Devashish Palai from Koraput, he asks, insects are carnivorous or not? All aquatic insects.
No. All aquatic insects are not carnivorous. Some of them are carnivorous, and many of them are detritivore, or some of them are even herbivores are also there, especially aquatic bugs. Or they feed on like decaying organic matter. Most of the Diptera feed on decaying organic matter. Mayflies feed on detritus, or even the caddis flies. So, but there are predators also. For example, mosquitoes are predators, and aquatic bugs. Most of them are predators. They feed on other aquatic bugs, other aquatic insects and invertebrates. But you get all of them. You get predators, saprophytes, not saprophytes, predators, detritivores, and other groups also. There are parasitoids also. There are aquatic hymenopterans. Parasitoids are also there. Very small in number.
Anvesha Mukherjee, she asks, how we know an unknown insect is terrestrial or aquatic? If aquatic, then how we know that it is underwater, surface water insect? Which body structure represent these things?
Okay, so like one is that you taxonomically identify, like if you know the family, like for example, if I'm getting an unknown insect, like mostly what we do, like when we get, how people know that you run a key, you run a taxonomy key, and okay, this belongs to this family. So this family is aquatic or terrestrial, that is already known by studies by other researchers. So that is how you place that okay, this insect is aquatic insect. So that is a basic way of doing this. Are there any other ways, like if you are not a taxonomist, or if you don't know how to run a key, is there a way to identify whether it is aquatic or terrestrial? Yes. Like for example, if you look at their morphology, like whether the legs are designed to walk on terrestrial system, or they are modified to swim. Like if you look at an aquatic insect leg, like for example a aquatic bug or a aquatic beetle leg, the hind legs are like a oar or a pad, like paddles to swim. Okay, so that is how you know whether this can be aquatic or non-aquatic. And other thing is that whether they are bottom dwellers or surface dwellers. Again, morphology will help. Morphology will help in the sense that, like most of the water spiders which are living on water surface, they have very long legs, so that their body weight is dispersed, and they use the water surface tension to stay on the water. And aquatic beetles, for example, they are diving beetles, so they have their body like a boat shape or stream shape, so they can dive deep into the water. So that is how you just by looking at whether it is an aquatic or non-aquatic.
Swagat Rath is asking, there are any impact of seasons on occurrence of aquatic insects? Seasonal impact, any impact of season?
Yeah, seasonality.
Seasonal impact.
You mean season, no?
Yes.
Okay, so the aquatic insects are highly seasonal, correct? So because they have very clear seasons, and it depends. It is again species specific. So, but generally speaking, most of the aquatic insects, if you are doing sampling, I think it is better to do after monsoon. Because during monsoon, what happens is that the entire system gets disturbed because of flash floods and other things, and many species get carried away by the water currents. So after the monsoon rain subsides, so especially during October, November, when the streams and water bodies become stable, the community also becomes stable, and you can get most of them in the adult stages. So if you are doing in an early monsoon or a late summer, you can see them in the larva or nymphal stages. Then you put it in larva or nymphal. So, and some species complete their life cycle over more than 1 year, and some of them complete life cycle in less than 1 year. So then also you get to see season. So, but generally speaking, there is a clear seasonality. So the you can see them large number just after monsoon. It's a very good season.
Anvesha Mukherjee, she asked once again, which body structure of aquatic insects helps to breathe underwater?
Okay, so I already told you, so like some of these aquatic insects, like aquatic bugs, so they have, some species have a siphon at the end of the abdomen. So they keep the siphon over the water surface, like when we do snorkeling. So the snorkel is just, the snorkel pipe is just out of the water so that you get atmospheric oxygen. So similarly, they have this pipe, they have these siphons out of the water to get atmospheric oxygen. But some species have gills, like mayflies and even dragonflies, or even other caddisflies. They have gills in their body. So through the gills, they take atmosphere dissolved oxygen. That is by through the exchange of that gaseous exchange they get. And some of the species can even through the body surface, that is by diffusion, they can take oxygen. So as you know that the insects don't have lungs, so most of the oxygenation happens through trachea and hemolymph system. So the gills are supplied with very good network of trachea and hemolymph, so they get oxygen through that.
Krishnakant Bakshi asks, sir, what is the mesh size of insect net for aquatic insects?
Okay, so the mesh size is generally, it is 150 microns in the for the kick net. But if you are using a pond net or even the a dip net or a D net, it can be a little bit bigger because you are going to collect a bigger size of insects.
Then Siddharth Bhave, how much salinity has chironomid larva can tolerate? As sometimes I observe chironomid larva during sediment sampling in mangroves associated wetlands. She had, Siddharth Bhave had observed these larvae in the mangrove associated wetlands during sampling of sediments. So he is asking about the salinity tolerance of that particular larva. So chironomid larva.
No, I have no idea about the salinity tolerance of this chironomid larva. But I think it is also again species specific, because there are a large number of species are there in chironomids, and you should try to look at which species of chironomids are there in the mangrove areas.
Subhasmita Maharana asks,
But
any
chironomids also found in Chilka Lake. Hello.
Ah,
Chironomids also found in Chilka Lake in Nalban, where salinity even goes to 25 parts ppt, 25 ppt.
okay, okay. Thank you, Mr.
Subhasmita Maharana asks, any equipments to record insect automatically? Automatically.
Automatically, no. There is no instruments for it automatically.
Susan Karmakar asks, are there any aquatic insects which have harmful effect in fish culture?
Any
Aquatic insect harmful for fish culture?
fish culture? Yes, dragonfly larva is one of the major predators in fish culture, especially the large dragonflies like achinid larva. Then you have these several of these aquatic bugs, Coryxids and Notonectids. They all feed on small fingerlings and even eggs of these fishes. So in many fish culture, to just get rid of these aquatic insects, they even spray insecticides before the preparation of the fish pond in commercial fish ponds. So they all.
Supriya Gupta asks, how can we protect ourselves from insect bites when we are going for a field to study the insects? Any specific mechanism?
One is that your clothing should not be very much exposed kind of clothing. It should be well protected, because when you go to field, there are several insects which will bite, not just mosquitoes, but there are tabanids, there are there are tabanids are there are some black flies are there. So all these things can bite you, and like sand flies. So one is that protective clothing. You should have very good protective clothing so that it doesn't cover most of your body parts, so you will get minimum. Then you should also have very good stockings, lead socks you can put to prevent. And you can, like, especially like if you are going to very like marshy areas or where you expect that there is a lot of mosquitoes are there, you can put some herbal based mosquito repellents which will help you for few hours, but again once you sweat and once you are inside water, again you have to apply. So these are some repellents you can use, basic repellents you can use, simple repellents. That is only way you can prevent bites.
Thank you very much, sir. We have almost taken all the questions that have been asked by the participants. And still, if anybody is having some more questions, you can interact with sir. I hope no more questions, sir. Now, now we have come to the concluding session of this particularly Meet the Expert Let Us Discuss Biodiversity. I would like to thank Dr. K. Subramaniam for his kind presence in today's lecture, and he has delivered wonderful aspects of aquatic insect diversity in India. And almost his slides were all mesmerizing. I had never seen such beautiful slides throughout this journey. Sir, thank you very much for your kind presence and illuminating the participants. Also, I thank Honorable Director, Zoological Survey of India for his kind permission to continue with this program. And I thank all the participants for your kind patience and listening us. Thank you all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you all the participants for your patient listening. Wonderful questions. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Anjan. Thank you. Thank you.